April 22nd, 2017, Bristol, Tennessee. NASCAR is in town for the weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway, and before the Cup Series runs the main event on Sunday, the Xfinity Series is gearing up for its 7th race of the 2017 season, the Fitzgerald Glider Kits 300. The fans are wondering who will win today, but the statisticians of the sport are eyeing an even weirder potential outcome, one that has nothing to do with who will be going to victory lane in a few hours, and everything to do with the driver who hasn't gone to victory lane in his Xfinity career to date. I'm talking about Darrell Wallace Jr., nicknamed Bubba. He's in his 3rd season driving the number 6 Ford for Jack Roush's Xfinity program, and today he has the opportunity to do something that seems nearly unfathomable. After wrecking out in the season opener at Daytona, Bubba scraped and clawed his way to a 6th place finish the following week. And the week after that. And the week after that. And the week after that. And one more week after that for 5 consecutive races. As he straps in today at Bristol, starting from the rear due to a tech inspection issue, I'm sure just like any other week, he'd be thrilled to get a finish higher than 6th. His sponsorship is up in the air, and if he wants to keep this ride past spring, he's going to have to attract some names by going out there and proving his mettle. Going 6 in a row with 6th place in the number 6 is not his primary goal. It'd be a neat piece of trivia, and that many top 10s ain't bad, but it's not exactly something a driver would be jumping at the chance to put on their resume. Why? Because scoring in the same numerical position as your car number has no inherent correlation with your performance. The factors that allow this to happen are almost completely beyond the driver's control. So much, in fact, that there isn't actually a term for this phenomenon yet, because it's completely irrelevant. In the interest of making this script a bit easier on me, I'm going to give it one. Ordinaling yourself. In math, an ordinal number is one that appears on a list, marking a position relative to other entries on that list. In this case, Bubba's ordinal number would be 6th, whereas the corresponding cardinal number is just 6. I really wish those terms were reversed so I could make a cheeky pun like NASCAR, but sometimes luck just ain't on your side. So yeah, Bubba's got a chance to do something that seems really weird, but how unprecedented would it actually be? To find out, I trudged through Racing Reference, the old fantasy racing cheat sheet, driver's averages, Wikipedia, and other databases for days' worth of data, jotting down every recorded instance of a driver ordinaling themselves across the 71-year history of the NASCAR Cup Series. Why? Truth be told, I've wanted to look into this since it occurred back in 2017, but compiling stats mid-season felt counterproductive, and I was always too busy during the NASCAR offseason to commit to a large-scale project during the winter. The halting of the 2020 season due to, health reasons gave me the chance, and I'm seizing it because if there's anything the folks over at SB Nation indirectly taught me, it's that stat diving is a subgenre of sports journalism with an eager audience, and that audience has never been larger on YouTube than when most of the country is cooped up at home, sportsless, watching Timmy Hill embarrass champions on national television, and wait, what? But Marbula 1 ended already. Who's driving that orange? Nothing makes sense anymore. I'm going crazy. No, it's not going crazy. Math. Math champions the sublime and the mundane in equal measure. It can be cruel, or it can be benevolent. It all depends on how deeply you look. And though I technically work an essential personnel job, I had nothing else to distract myself with in my free time, so I looked. Hard. This is what I found. Without further ado, here's a comprehensive summary of ordinaling in the NASCAR Cup Series. First, let's do what any responsible researcher does and talk parameters. Though I've led off with an example of self-ordinaling in the second-tier Xfinity series, the absence of a free, intuitive database that makes it relatively easy to search for examples of this phenomenon in the Xfinity and Truck series means I'm restricting this research to the sanctioning body's highest division. Prior to 1972, this was known as the Grand National Series, and since 1972, temporary sponsorships aside, it's colloquially known as the Cup Series. For the sake of flow, I'll be referring to both as the Cup Series, but I am aware of the distinction. Non-points paying exhibition races, such as the All-Star Race or preseason festivities held during speed weeks, are excluded, as are the car numbers 0 and 00, since you can't finish in the 0th position. I suppose you could make the argument that a withdrawal or a DNQ could constitute finishing 0th, but that's not finishing 0th so much as it is not starting, and in their honor, I'm going to not start debating whether or not they should count. Way back in the day, a driver could also run 3-digit numbers, or some combination of a number and a letter. These also aren't included because A, the largest NASCAR field ever maxed out at 82 cars, and B, to my knowledge, no racing database has a function to search for results by car numbers with specific combinations of numbers and letters. So I'm not putting myself through hell trying to track down every archaic entry that fits that bill. On a more manageable note, in NASCAR, you can run a double-digit car with a 0 as the first digit, and while such 0x cars are relatively rare, they were and still are a thing. Since they're less of a pain to search for and spiritually compliant with pedantics, I'm keeping all of them except the 00 eligible. After all, finishing second in the 2 or the 0-2 is effectively the same result. One last disclaimer here, a lot of old races still have incomplete records to this day. While the finishing order is almost always intact, dig through results from the 50s and 60s and you'll see several instances of car numbers not being recorded for drivers who are basically irrelevant to those respective races. As a result, this research is all but guaranteed to not be 100% accurate, and I welcome corrections or additional contributions from informed individuals who can cite their sources. The cause of archiving self-ordinaling goes way beyond my own pride, and that makes perfect sense because it's an extremely stupid cause to begin with. With all that in mind, here's the overview of my findings in compliance with that criteria. There have been 2,610 NASCAR Cup races overall, and in those, I found 1,408 instances of ordinaling spread across 345 different drivers and 1,083 distinct races. That means as of this recording, 4 meet space races into the 2020 season, at least one driver has self-ordinaled in 41% of all races run. The first occurred in NASCAR's third ever race on August 7th, 1949. Red Byron crashed out at Occoneechee Speedway in Hillsborough, North Carolina with his number 22 Oldsmobile. It was his only reported crash that season, and with 2 wins in the other 7 races, that 22nd place finish didn't matter. He'd go on to win the 1949 championship. The most recent self-ordinal came in the most recent race, when Chris Buescher bounced back from a blown tire to finish 17th at Phoenix on March 8th, 2020. Were the other 1,406 cases spread out evenly over time? No. When NASCAR started, it started fairly slow, and there were a lot of higher car numbers entered in races, perhaps as a way to establish individuality in a new competition or something like that. 1954 was an outlier in the sport's first decade, producing 27 self-ordinal finishes compared to an average of 11 in the other seasons through the 50s. But in the 60s, as the schedule lengthened, field sizes increased, and drivers settled into the usage of lower numbers a little more often, the opportunity for self-ordinaling likewise grew. In 1969, drivers recorded 30 self-ordinal finishes, a record that would stand for the next 25 years. When NASCAR instated the start of the modern era in 1972, the schedule shortened and self-ordinaling skidded to a near halt. Drivers were once again opting for car numbers too high to ordinal, and though the field sizes could be larger on any given weekend, there were less total chances for competitors to seal the deal. To exemplify this drought of an era, 1974 produced just 6 self-ordinal finishes, the lowest since the sport's first year, where an 8-race schedule was only able to produce 4. That's still 1 every 2 races, and in comparison, 74's schedule had 30 races. Forget a 50-50 shot, we only got a self-ordinal finish that year at a rate of once every 5 races. When long-running teams began to establish themselves, things started to change. By the 1980s, self-ordinaling returned to its 1950s rates, and by the 90s, cars were regularly breaching 20 self-ordinal finishes per season. In 1994, the record was shattered, and it still stands to this day. 39 self-ordinal finishes spread across 31 races. Contrary to my blabbering, I am no mathematician, but I do believe that's a rate of way more than once per race. After a couple slight dips in the early 2000s, an annual self-ordinal total in the high 20s or 30s has become the new normal, and with about 3/4 of the field these days running car numbers in the 30s or lower, it remains likely that this trend will continue to be common for the foreseeable future. Shifting from the when to the where, 113 of NASCAR's 171 racetracks through the years have produced a self-ordinal result, and of those 58 tracks that failed to do so, only 14 ran more than 1 sanctioned race ever. The Cleveland County Fairgrounds in Shelby, North Carolina ran a record 6 races without producing a self-ordinal result. Every track currently on the schedule, as of 2020, has recorded at least 1 self-ordinal finish, ranging from precisely once, that's Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at the Charlotte Roval's second ever race in 2019, to a stunning 92 produced at Daytona. Not far behind, Martinsville has scored 80, Richmond 77, Michigan 75, the Charlotte Motor Speedway Oval 71, and Talladega a nice ol' 69. Of tracks not on the schedule, the most recently disappeared still overshadow many of the series' newer additions. North Wilkesboro hasn't run a Cup race since 1996, but it's still witnessed 53 self-ordinals during its 48-year history. And Rockingham has been absent from the schedule since 2004, but its 33 self-ordinals still vastly outnumber Fontana and Kansas's 19, Las Vegas's 15, Homestead Miami's 14, Chicagoland's 10, and Kentucky's 5. The number of times these tracks have been visited plays the most pivotal role in how likely it is that they've been self-ordinaled on, which is to say that because it's not a particularly uncommon phenomenon, it's bound to happen sooner rather than later. But that's far from the only contributing factor. I already alluded to it in vaguer terms, but field size matters. For most contemporary fans, the numbers 42, 43, or 40 will stick out as the most well-known maximum field limits of the modern era. But back in the day, field sizes could reach nearly double that, or shy of half of it. When the modern era began, it also eliminated the possibility of drivers who ran exclusively high numbers from ever ordinaling themselves. 7-time champ Jimmy Johnson has only run the number 48 in the Cup Series, and in the time he's been racing, there haven't been any 48-car fields. But before the modern era, that was possible. The highest number to accomplish it was the number 53, when Bill Cornwall completed just shy of half the laps in the 1954 race at the old Daytona Road and Beach Course. To his credit, though that result sucks, the field that day had 62 cars in it, and Cornwall's Oldsmobile was reportedly running at the finish. Per the records, this was the only race Cornwall ever ran in the Cup Series. He didn't climb into his car that day with the hope that he'd ordinal himself. But he did, and his career ended with a 100% self-ordinal rate. And from what I can surmise, a 100% photographer evasion rate as well. Good job. The numbers 49, 47, 45, and 44 also pulled off self-ordinal finishes before the field size shrank. G.C. Spencer, Bruce Hill, Blackie Watt, Bill Gazaway, Bill Seifert, and Lloyd Dane were the 6 lucky drivers to ordinal in spectacularly miserable fashion that deep in the pack. Keep your eye on Dane, though. We'll revisit him later. But first, we're going to take a brief intermission here. Listing all of those just reminded me, the mid-20th century provided a treasure trove of objectively silly driver names, and if I didn't take a moment to pause and reflect on them, this whole video would provide a shadow of the entertainment that it could. The good old days were a different time. Slang was different. English was different. But knowing all that still won't prepare you for the sheer number of dicks that self-ordinaled a car at the Cup level. We've got some innocuous dicks. Dick Brooks, Dick Hutcherson, Dick May. But there are even more goofy dicks. 10-time ordinaler Dick Rathman. So hot we can't even see him, Dick Burns, the uncreatively named Dick Dixon, the even more redundantly named Dick Johnson, and, of course, every NASCAR fan's most cherished dick of them all, Dick Trickle. Trickle's limited success in NASCAR's top division shouldn't really matter. His short track career is where he truly shined, winning well over 1,000 feature races, most of them in his native Wisconsin. Among competitors, he was most well known for that success, and among younger meme lords, he's probably more infamous for his habit of smoking cigarettes inside the car mid-race. Within the context of this video's premise, he also ordinaled 5 different car numbers to 7 finishes in as many years during the 90s. Sadly, his story takes a kind of dark turn post-retirement, but at his prime, he was truly living good. Almost as good as disgraced isekai protagonist Virgil Livingood, who self-ordinaled in his 5th and final career race with the number 34 car, in the exact same event as Cornwall's remarkably unremarkable finish in the 53. Other ordinal drivers that caught my eye include Peck Peckham, Wimpy Irvin, Friday Hassler, Possum Jones, the unrelated Buckshot Jones, Cuckoo Marlin, Sterling Marlin, Banjo Matthews, Stick Elliott, Slick Johnson, and, are you ready for this? I don't think you're ready for this last one. God. Wondering what that T stands for? It's probably something generic, right? Tim, Tom, Tony, Ted. No, it's none of those. This gets even worse. I'm not joking. There was a man who showed up to races and competed under the name Tootle Estes. A quick Google search tells me that his given name was Herb and that he has a biography. I will not read it. I will not read it, for it will probably explain why this man went around calling himself Tootle, and I don't want to know the reason. The truth can't possibly live up to our collective imagination, and on track, Tootle couldn't live up to his car number. Except once, when he brought the number 30 car home in 30th and last place at Reading Fairgrounds in 1958, suffering a brake failure just 11 laps into the 200-lap event. Toodaloo, Tootle. We hardly knew ye. Those are just a handful of the 345 drivers to ordinal themselves at the Cup level, and as it's probably becoming clear to you, for as trivial as it is to pull this feat off, it's rare to do it a lot. Cornwall, Livingood, Tootle, and Danica Patrick, the only woman to ordinal herself as far as I can tell, aren't alone in their one-hit wonderdom. Of those 345 drivers, 157 of them, that's 46%, only ordinaled themselves once in their entire career. Of the remaining drivers, 46 did it just twice. Another 65 did it between 3 and 5 times, and these 57 in blue have done it between 6 and 13 times. How many does that leave us with? 20. Let's regroup. These are the top 20 most self-ordinal drivers of all time. Combined, they've clocked 444 self-ordinals. In other words, the top 6% of drivers in this account for 32% of the all-time total. That's nuts. They're nuts. So let's take a closer look at them. Who are these guys? What makes them so special? To put it simply, having long careers helps. All of these men started over 300 Cup races. That's about 9 contemporary seasons worth. And more than half of them have over 600 starts. The more chances you have to ordinal yourself, the more it's bound to happen. But obviously, the numbers are important too, and either being really great in low-numbered equipment or being really mediocre in higher-numbered equipment makes you a prime candidate for ordinaling. Look no further for proof of this than four-way tie for 17th all-time. Denny Hamlin and Casey Kane each did it 14 times. All of Hamlin's instances came in the only number he's ever driven, the 11. And Kane's 14 self-ordinals are spread across the numbers 4, 5, and 9. Michael Waltrip and Bobby Labonte also ordinaled themselves 14 times, but Waltrip's were in the numbers 15, 21, 23, and 30, while the younger Labontes came from the numbers 18, 22, 37, and the last place 43. Guess which one of these four drivers won a championship? That's right, Labonte, because ordinaling doesn't fucking matter. Greg Biffle ranks 16th, and all of his 15 self-ordinals aptly came in the number 16. If only he had one more in him before retirement, he would have joined the likes of Elliott Sadler, David Reagan, and Matt Kenseth, who hold a three-way tie for 13th from 16 self-ordinals. Sadler and Reagan's careers involved a lot of team hopping, so they each got plenty of chances to ordinal in multiple numbers, and they made the most of it. In comparison, Kenseth settled in for longer stretches of time, and it actually took him until his 665th and final Cup start to ordinal a third car number. Moving up by another one, 3 members of the Allison family ordinaled themselves, but Patriarch Bobby recorded 17, more than his brother Donnie and son Davey combined. And just missing the top 10, John Sears ordinaled himself 18 times, all of them in the number 4 car. He's the most self-ordinal driver to exclusively ordinal one number throughout his entire career. There's another tie at 9th. Terry Labonte and Sterling Marlin each ordinaled themselves 19 times, and David Pearson ordinaled himself 20 times between 8 different car numbers, the most variety on this list. Bill Elliott ordinaled himself 23 times. Kevin Harvick has ordinaled himself 25 times to date, though he's almost surely going to clock in more of them. And Rusty Wallace ordinaled himself 27 times with just 2 car numbers, the 27 and the 2. Following suit in the number 2 is its current driver, Brad Keselowski, who's done it 28 times, just one instance behind Ricky Rudd for third, with 29 self-ordinals from 7 different car numbers. But the top 2 all-time self-ordinalers are leagues ahead of the rest. Any NASCAR fan could probably guess who ordinaled second most. Don't overthink it. This man is more famous for coming second than he is for winning. He finished runner-up in the championship standings 5 times and is widely regarded as the best NASCAR driver to never win a championship or a Daytona 500. I'm talking about Mark Martin, who clocked in 47 self-ordinals, most of them in the 6 car, but a few in the numbers 5 and 8 as well. And at the top of the charts, Dale Earnhardt Sr. pulled off a truly intimidating 53 self-ordinals between the numbers 2, 15, and most obviously, the 3 car. You've surely noticed a lot of repeat car numbers in that recap of ordinaling greats, and there's a reason for that. Unlike most stick and ball sports, retiring numbers isn't really a thing in NASCAR. Multiple drivers can and do ordinal the same number at different stages of time. No matter how many times a number has ordinaled, the number of drivers who have ordinaled it seems to average out around 10. Really good drivers tend to keep their rides, so they have more chances to ordinal themselves in the same number over longer periods of time. Even drivers with eligible numbers may not record many ordinal finishes if they're frankly better than those numbers. Kyle Busch, for instance, hasn't scored an ordinal in his number 18 car since 2010. In that time, he started all but 12 races. And in those 12 races he missed, 2 replacement drivers ordinaled the number 18 3 times. It wasn't the equipment that was the problem. Rowdy's just too damn good. But car numbers with a history as varied as the sport itself and not belonging to any one standout driver for long stretches of time have a rare opportunity in and of themselves. They get to partake in the scramble to see how many different drivers can ordinal in them. The numbers 17, 19, and 23 are tied for second in this regard. 20 different drivers apiece have ordinaled those 3 car numbers over the years, but just barely edging them out, the number 32 takes the cake, with 21 racers all managing to ordinal at least once in it. Here they are. So, we've talked about what makes ordinaling oneself likely, and which number has given the widest swath of drivers their due at ordinal glory. But which number itself has ordinaled the most? Presumably the number 1, right? After all, that's the finishing position everyone's striving for. And yet the number 1 isn't anywhere near the most winningest car number in NASCAR history. If we consider the 1 separate from the 0 one, the latter has only done so once, thanks to Joe Nemechek at Kansas in 2004. Though it really should have been twice, because this, you see this right here? This is still one of the dumbest calls in NASCAR history, and set a dangerous precedent that resulted in one of the most chicken shit rivalries in the modern history of the sport. Keselowski and Everett's escalation of this beef truly could have killed someone, and it all could have been cast in a different light, or avoided altogether if NASCAR just admitted that Tony Stewart forced Regan Smith below the fucking line. Look at the tape! It wasn't below until contact with the 20. That should have been another 0-1 ordinal. And Regan Smith should be a 2-time Cup Series race winner. I will not hear anything otherwise, but I digress.
He ain't gonna kill my boy.
Sunny weather there. Yeah, The sky was a permanent, brilliant blue, stretching on and on and on. To me, it felt like I was on another planet. New Hampshire. The number 1 without the 0 in front has only captured a win and thus ordinaled itself 20 times in the entire history of the sport. Remember Lloyd Dane? I told you he'd be back, and it's because he was the first to win in the number 1 car, taking the checkered at Portland in 1956, followed by Eddie Gray in Sacramento in 1959. But the first truly fantastic winner in the number 1 was Billy Wade, who won 4 consecutive races with it in a 9-day span at Old Bridge, Bridgehampton, Islip, and Watkins Glen during the middle of July 1964. Paul Lewis, David Pearson, Martin Truex Jr., and most recently Kurt Busch all won a single race in the number 1 car as well. Steve Park won 2, including at Rockingham in 2001 in the first week following his team owner Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s death at that year's Daytona 500. Donnie Allison won 4 races with the 1, tied for the most in terms of races won, but not in terms of prestige. The true trailblazer of that number is ironically considered by some to be one of the most overrated drivers in NASCAR history, Jamie McMurray. McMurray ran 16 full seasons in the Cup Series, never finished in the top 10 in points, and only pulled off 7 points-paying wins, but he sure made the most of them. Like Donnie, 4 of those came in the number 1 car. Unlike Donnie, for Jamie they included a Daytona 500 and a Brickyard 400, both during the 2010 season. He rounded out his tenure in that car with an additional win at the Fall Charlotte race that same year, the Fall Talladega race in 2013, and to top it all off, an All-Star race win in 2014. McMurray didn't have the chance to win often, but when he did not fuck around. He would go for broke over it, and earned a reputation for being reckless late in the game, especially on restrictor plate tracks. My favorite example of that is this right here. A narrow squeeze through the middle on the last lap at the 2017 Geico 500 at Talladega. Wow. I still don't know how he didn't cause a massive wreck with that move. That shouldn't have worked. I bring it up for another reason, though. I mentioned earlier that it's not out of the realm of possibility for multiple drivers to ordinal themselves in the same race. It's happened to 2 drivers in the same race over 200 times. 3 drivers in the same race, 30 times. 4 drivers have done it in the same race a rare 7 times. But 5? That's the record to beat, and it's only happened twice. One of those 2 times was right here. The other time it happened was at the August 1995 race at Michigan, albeit in a much less dramatic fashion there, as only 1 of the 5 even finished in the top half of the field. Know what else is rare? Ordinaling on the same date as your number. By my count, that's happened in just 3 of the 2,610 races in NASCAR history. Junior Johnson did it first in the number 3 at Asheville-Weaverville on March 3rd, 1963. Terry Labonte was next, coming home 5th in the number 5 at Sonoma on May 5th, 1996. But those are child's play, and one glance at the year proves it. You want a truly mind-boggling date alignment ordinal finish? Well, buckle up, you booty barker. The holy grail of them all is Clint Boyer's 7th place finish in the 0-7 at Daytona on July 7, 2007. If crossing the finish line upside down and on fire the last time he was at this track was what had to happen to pull off such a bizarre cosmic singularity, I think we can both agree it was absolutely worth it. Guess who won that July Daytona race, by the way? Jamie McMurray. But I still haven't answered my question. What number has ordinaled the most? Well, consider what I just showed you. It's damn hard to be the best, and it's comparatively easy to be almost the best, so the answer shouldn't come as a surprise to you. The number 2 car. It's come in second 93 times between 17 drivers, and the next closest number, the 3, is 18 self-ordinals behind. Dale Sr., Bobby Allison, Kurt Busch, and more all piloted the Deuce to many a second-place finish, but it didn't truly explode in prominence until the 90s. Since then, Rusty Wallace and Brad Keselowski have ordinaled that too 26 times apiece, and as you'd expect, the 2 of them have lost their fair share of exciting races with it that way. Here are a few of my favorites. If you watch NASCAR around the turn of the century, you're surely familiar with Jeff Gordon and Rusty Wallace's tangles, like this iconic clip of Gordon bump and running Wallace on the last lap at Bristol in 1997. And a second time with 3 to go at the same track in 2002. Number 2 was also great but not great enough at Watkins Glen, where it finished runner-up at 4 consecutive races at the track between 2010 and 2013. The 2012 finish just so happens to be one of the most exciting final laps of racing I've seen in any form of motorsport, like ever, so I'm just going to play it here in its entirety. If you've seen it, you probably feel the same, and if you haven't, kick back and watch this.
There's something wrong with the 18. Now Ambrose trying to get second from Keselowski while he tries to get the lead from Kyle. Oh, contact in the S's.
It's right. Got it.
Danger dangerous spot on the track for Kyle to be sideways. Looks like he gets off to the guardrail. No caution yet. Here's the race for the lead.
Keselowski's got damage on the left front.
Is the tire going to make it all the way around? And will the 9 help him?
Oh,
everybody's in the grass.
Oh, you're clear. Dig.
That might have been the race right there. We'll see. No, Keselowski's slower. Keselowski's got a problem. Trying to stay with Ambrose. 2 final corners. Do they use the bumpers? A nudge, a push. Can Ambrose save it? To the checkered flag. Who gets here first?
Clear.
Ambrose, 9. Keselowski, 2. Final corner. Marcus Ambrose is going to win at Watkins Glen in a remarkable last lap turn of events.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. Want some more? Well, here are some other cool stats from the number 2. As far as I can tell, it might be the only car to ordinal in consecutive races over an off-season. This happened when Kurt Busch finished second in the 2007 season finale at Homestead, then pushed his Penske teammate Ryan Newman to victory in the 2008 season opening Daytona 500. But the true glory of the number 2 is that to this day, it's the highest number to have accomplished ordinals in its own number of consecutive races in the Cup Series. The number 3 came close. Buddy Baker was able to finish third twice in a row 3 times throughout 1968, but failed to go 3 for 3 with that 3. Dale Earnhardt Sr. finished third in his number 3 times in a 4-race stretch at the start of the 1989 season, but the dumbass had to go and finish second in the race that interrupted the streak. Why would you do that, Dale? Come on! The number 4 almost did it too. Similar to Senior, Kevin Harvick finished 4th in 3 of 4 races towards the start of the 2019 season, but he had to settle for 9th at Phoenix, a track he's normally way better than that on. Once real-life racing resumes, he'll have plenty of chances to alter that stat for good, but he hasn't done it yet. All of which is to say that Bubba Wallace's chance at glory, that chance to ordinal himself for the same number of consecutive races as his car number, was in fact astonishingly rare. Again, I want to emphasize that this analysis has only looked at the Cup Series, and Bubba's feat didn't occur at that level, but if we can extrapolate the odds across the lower divisions, which, by the way, have smaller field sizes and even fewer races per year, I think it's safe to say that on this April afternoon in Bristol, the race wouldn't be between Bubba and his competitors, but between him and pure mathematical chaos. Now that I've held you in suspense for way longer than I should be able to get away with, it's time to revisit a moment in history. Watch in all his glory as yeah. Yeah, that's what happened. Leave it to the number 0 to rain on the self-ordinal parade. You just really wanted attention, Smithley, didn't you? But that was inevitable, right? For as gracious and awe-invoking as the gods of math can be, they can also be serious killjoys. This whole expedition has proved as much. Bubba failed to continue the streak, but as I've mentioned a jillion times, ordinaling yourself doesn't matter. There are more important things, like, keeping his ride. He did at least keep his ride, right? But it wasn't all bad. A few months later, he'd be called up to the Cup Series to fill in for Eric Almirola, who was forced to sit out of the number 43 car for a few weeks following fractures to his vertebrae in this crash at Kansas. When Almirola left for another, better team the following season, Bubba took over the number 43 Cup ride fielded by Richard Petty full-time at the start of 2018, and it's the ride he still drives today. In this era, the field size has been maxed out at 40, making it impossible for Bubba to ordinal that number 43 unless the rules change. And despite his moniker The King and his 200 wins, 7 championships, and 1,000-plus starts, Bubba's car owner Richard Petty never ordinaled himself in the Cup Series either. Most of the races he ran didn't have 43 cars, and the ones that did, well, he was just better than that. He was the king. And as if to get the elephant in the room to stop staring at him, inheriting Richard's legacy means Bubba won't even have to think about ordinaling himself anymore, especially the haunt of that one time his self-ordinal streak came to a close, 1 week short of going 6 for 6 in 6th with the 6 car. Or how, immediately following that 33rd place DNF at Bristol, he went on to Richmond for the next race and finished, you guessed it, in 6th. Thanks for watching.